We're politically polarized to an extreme not seen since the Civil War. We're in debt to a level that most people cannot even comprehend, and we have no plan to make things better. We have the highest cost of medical care in the world and only fair results compared to other industrialized countries. Congress is perpetually locked in a battle for stagnation, and our infrastructure is crumbling. We wring hands over the hard boiling of our planet and steadfastly not only refuse to make things better, we actually do things that make it worse. We honor our military people, but continue to get them killed for dishonest reasons in perpetual wars. And we are angry all the time. I'm a card-carrying member of the baby boomers, lodged in the leading edge of that group. I grew up in the late 1940s and 50s, which was itself a rather odd time. We had won the war, and America had the only fully functioning industrial economy in the world. Being number one was a pretty easy thing to do, and we dominated the world economy and expanded our belief in American exceptionalism as the natural order of things. We were steeped in the culture of stability, of conformity, and of reverence for authority. After all, that had worked. Then Elvis wore his hair long and wiggled his hips, and the greatest generation didn't like that. The electric guitar put an end to the big bands, and music changed to something that was called everything but music by anyone who was part of the establishment, and that rocked the boat even more. And we sent our military people to Vietnam, and suddenly everything changed. We were raised with the expectation that all men had an obligation to serve at least 2 years in the military. But the military was being sent to do something that was simply unacceptable to those who would be drafted. It was a war we were lied into, reference the phony Gulf of Tonkin attack. A war that was never declared by a cowardly Congress, and a war that eventually cost the lives of over 58,000 American men and women before we left that country. Even larger were the lies President Johnson told us. We were told by the press that he had a credibility gap. That was polite speak for saying that he lied. We're only now getting to the point where the press is willing to name it directly when a president lies. Odd that it took so long. But lie he did. So did Richard Nixon, who told us he had a secret plan to end the war, but instead was driven to continue it because, in his words, he refused to be, quote, the first American president to lose a war, close quotes. The plain translation of that is that his reputation as a winning war president was more important to him than the lives of the 28,000 military personnel who died while he was in office and continuing that war. And of course there was Watergate. Yes, our president really was a crook, and our sense of trust ratcheted down even further. Gerald Ford should have been a calm respite from the torrent of deceit coming from Washington, but then he pardoned Nixon for crimes he committed or might have committed. So not only did Nixon betray our trust, but the next guy in the Oval Office ensured that he got away with it. What happened to the notion of penalties for doing wrong? We couldn't even trust those who were sent to restore our trust. Jimmy Carter may be best known for having been the leader who couldn't lead our 52 citizen hostages out of Iran. We trust our leaders to keep us safe, but he was unable to find a way to do that. Ronald Reagan brought us the glamour of a Hollywood actor with all the performance chops that implies. He told us it was morning in America and that this country was the shining city on the hill. He promised smaller government, and then he tripled the size of our debt. And he was in charge of the masterly deceitful Iran-Contra affair, which broke multiple laws. And he got away with it. His operatives barely got a slap on the wrist. How could we trust our justice system after that? George H.W. Bush told us over and over, quote, read my lips, no new taxes. Then the burden of his and Reagan's spending caught up with him, and he had to raise taxes. Who can you believe? Then the Clinton era began, bringing with it things we simply had not seen before. Even before Clinton first sat down in the Oval Office, the Republicans started smearing him with immorality-laced charges. Ken Starr spent millions of dollars looking for Clintonian malfeasance and couldn't find a single example. But that didn't stop the accusers in Congress, who continue that drumbeat to this day. Once Newt Gingrich became Speaker of the House, he managed to stop Congress and the government from functioning at all. He was trying to strong-arm Clinton, but instead strong-armed the country. That was before Gingrich was found to have illegally used a tax-exempt organization for political purposes and provided false information to the House Ethics Committee. He was forced to resign. So much for trust in Congress. And of course, Bill Clinton assured him that he, quote, didn't have sex with that woman, Ms. Lewinsky, close quotes. But he did, regardless of what the meaning of is. Then we got George W. Bush. He refused to listen to the experts and 9/11 happened. His spinmeisters then spent the next 7 years telling us how Bush had kept America safe. Go to the 9/11 Memorial in New York and repeat that phrase as you walk around the reflecting pools and read the engraved names of 2,996 people who died there on that day when Bush was keeping America safe. Bush lied us into 2 wars that continue in one form or another and have destabilized an entire region of the world, killing hundreds of thousands of people and displacing millions more, and with no end in sight. He was all about deregulation and lower taxes, especially for those already wealthy. The wars were put on the national credit card, making this the first time our country went into war and refused to pay for it, leaving us with trillions of dollars of debt, an amount that continues to grow. And Bush presided over the largest crash of our economy since 1929. Presidents are supposed to have the best experts advising them about what to do to avoid catastrophe, but Bush utterly failed to protect America or Americans. At the end of his presidency, over 700,000 Americans were losing their jobs every month. The banking industry had managed to make itself doomed to collapse thanks to brainless deregulation, and in the process harmed a lot of people, including the thousands of Americans whose home mortgages were foreclosed, many illegally. The entire banking industry showed itself to be untrustworthy. The entire mess, the loss of employment for millions of Americans, the foreclosures, the banking collapse Bush poured money into, and his 2 wars fell into Barack Obama's lap. We needed a national stimulus to get the economy going, but the Republicans had dedicated themselves to making job one, and this is a quote, making sure that Barack Obama is a one-term president. That is to say, America and Americans came second. So the stimulus was half the size it needed to be, and Republicans made sure that 1/3 of the money wound up in the pockets of wealthy people rather than stimulating the economy. Then they blamed Obama for a stimulus plan that failed. In fact, they blamed Obama for everything. They opposed bills that they themselves had offered prior to Obama taking office, once Obama supported them. They opposed a health care plan that the very conservative Heritage Foundation and Republicans had been proposing for decades. All of the blaming and demonizing put yet more stress on Americans' trust in our institutions, trust which was further eroded by yet another congressionally led governmental shutdown, this time over whether we would pay our debts. How could anyone trust when we threatened to default? The Supreme Court is supposed to be the arbiter of disputes and laws and keep us in line with the Constitution. But in 2010, Chief Justice John Roberts contorted the Citizens United case into something that was not in contest and produced the legalization of big money influence of our elections and our government. With that, all 3 branches of government were plainly untrustworthy. Now we have a president who makes baseless attacks on the press, calling them the most dishonest people in the world. So now trust in the press is in question. The list of examples of trust-killing events could be many times the length of this list, but the point is that we have repeatedly been lied to, undermined, betrayed, robbed. Our rights have been stolen and our needs ignored. Our standard of living is dropping. The rich get richer and the number of our poor expands. And that is why everyone knows the system is rigged. Over 40% of our citizens don't bother to vote. We're a nation of apathetic, disinterested citizens. We're a nation of angry people. We are politically polarized and haven't a clue how to have a conversation with one another. Our toxic symptoms have come about through our decades-long decline in trust in our institutions, and that loss of trust is because of the untrustworthy things our leaders have done. Failing to fix that will be catastrophic for all of us. The challenge before us right now is to figure out how to do that and then get to work. I'm Jack Altshuler.